My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's edition of Your Family Lawyer, the podcast where we explore the legal stories behind family, business, and legacy in Nigeria. My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer. Before we dive deep into today's episode, let me remind you to hit the subscribe button and ensure that you don't miss another episode. If you're interested in protecting your family's future and avoiding legal pitfalls that arise, this is the place that you should be at the moment. I will urge you to call us today, send us a message, and let's help you take the right legal steps towards familial bliss. My job to lighten your burden and to show you the pathways to justice, to lasting peace and fulfillment in your family, and particularly in times and places where there may seem to be none. In today's episode, we'll take a journey into the beautiful complexities of adoption and blended families. Adoption and blended families come with unique joys and challenges. For some, it's a journey of hope and belonging. For others, it may bring up questions of identity and adjustments, and sometimes rift and regret. In Nigeria, adoption is governed by a mix of federal laws, state laws, and customary practices, of course, depending on your location. Adoption in our vast country, with its multiple ethnic nationalities and diverse customs and traditions, could sometimes be difficult and even frustrating. The procedures, the requirements, and the legal status of adopted children are primarily set out in the Child Rights Act of 2003, which applies in the Federal Capital Territory and the states that have domesticated the law. I know for sure that Lagos State has, Ekiti has, Anambra State has. Quite a number of others may have done so as well. Please note that virtually every state has its own adoption laws and institutions that govern adoption. Now, let us first clarify what adoption means, because we may be using the term and it may sound strange to some persons. Adoption is a process that permanently transfers all parental rights and responsibilities, along with legal filiations, from a biological or legal parent to an adoptive parent or parents. It creates a legal family relationship between a child and individuals who are not their natural parents. The adopted child thereby gains the same legal status as a child born naturally to the adoptive parents. Don't get it wrong. Legal adoption is not as straightforward as the definition I have just given you suggests. It is not like just walking by your neighbor's yard and harmlessly picking a stray flower. Those who treat adoption in this manner often run foul of the law. If you wish to adopt a child, do it the right way. It should be tedious, but I assure you it is rewarding in the end. Next, let's talk about the legal requirements for adoption. Section 131 of the Child Rights Act sets out the eligibility criteria for child adoption. It requires that an adoptive parent must be at least 25 years old and must be 21 years older than the child, unless the adopter is adopting a relative of his or hers. Married couples must adopt jointly unless one spouse is deceased or the court allows sole adoption. Single parents may adopt, but just wait a minute. Did you know that single males cannot adopt female children unless the court is satisfied that there is no risk of abuse? It's not only adopting parents that have to be eligible. The child to be adopted also has to be eligible for adoption. That child must be under the age of 17 years. You don't adopt an adult. And ordinarily, the child may need to be declared eligible for adoption by the court, particularly if the child is an orphan or abandoned child. What then are the procedures for adoption? We're going to tell you the procedures based on one jurisdiction, Lagos State. Number one is that you make an application to the family court, to the court, submitted to the magistrate or the high court as may be designated by the child rights law. Second, an investigation, or what is called home study, is conducted by a social welfare officer to assess the suitability of the adoptive parents. Next is the filing of necessary documents, and they include the birth certificate or age declaration of the adopting parents, their marriage certificate if they are married, medical certificate of fitness, just in case you want to be sure that you have the mental capacity to do so. Then you must show financial capacity through bank documents. When these are done satisfactorily, then there is what takes place next is called foster placement. That is pre-adoption placement. The child is placed with the applicant for an initial period of between 3 to 6 months under supervision of a welfare officer. Thereafter, a court hearing is done and an order is granted. If after the placement period the court decides to grant an adoption order, then you have adopted a child. Of course, then issuance of an adoption certificate is done. Once adopted, the child is legally recognized as a child of the adoptive parents. That child is now a child of the parents. What then is the legal status of adopted children? Just for clarity, Section 138 of the Child Rights Act is applicable here. Under it, adopted children have the same legal rights as biological children, including the right to inherit from adoptive parents, the right to the surname of the adoptive parents, the right to care, education, and protection. In truth, let us call the proverbial spade what it is, a spade. Under Nigerian law, a lawfully adopted child is a child, a proper child to all intents and purposes known to law. They enjoy all the rights of a biological child, but just be sure to follow the rules of adoption strictly. Next, we'll take into a peep into the sometimes duplicitous and treacherous world of stepchildren in blended families. Before we embark on that journey, let us attempt to answer the question, what actually is a blended family? A blended family is a family structure that is formed when two people enter into a marriage, or these days a committed partnership, and at least one of them brings children from a previous relationship into the new household. This type of family dynamic arises when, for instance, there is remarriage after a divorce or as a result of widowhood. Then sometimes long-term cohabitation, where children are born and the people are not married and they subsequently get married. In other words, if you've had a child, for instance, as a youth, and then you get married, you bring that child into your new family. It is called a blended family. It could also arise by reason of adoption or fostering, where one or both partners legally become step-parents. Blended families require patience. They require flexibility and effort, but can become strong and loving units when managed with care and diligence. Under Nigerian law, stepchildren in blended families generally do not have automatic inheritance rights from their step-parents unless they are specifically adopted by that parent or provided for in a will. Their legal status and inheritance rights depend heavily on testamentary disposition and intestacy laws, and of course adoption laws. Let me explain what this means. If you bring a child, for instance, that you've had before you got married, and your wife is a stepmother, that child does not have inheritance rights with your wife. She cannot inherit directly from your wife unless your wife made a will to accommodate that child, or your wife adopts the child. The same thing applies if your wife had a child and you got married to her. The child that she brings into the marriage is your stepchild, but does not have a right to inherit from you unless you lawfully adopt that child or make provision for that child in a will. Having explained this, let me put it perhaps in a formal manner so that you can understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that under the Child Rights Act or the laws in various states, a stepchild must be formally adopted for the step parent to become a lawful parent with full parental rights and duties, including inheritance through intestacy. Without legal adoption, a stepchild remains a stranger in law to the step parent, not to the actual parent. Please stay informed and, as always, be good to your family. My name is Chuma Chinye, and I am your family lawyer.